bit. But anyway, adaptive, the definition, I know we put out some articles last year about definitions and the issues that there's no common definitions. And again, coming from the science background, scientists gather in societies, and these groups establish definitions. The chemists have a periodic chart. They have a definition of what each elements, its symbol is and what it is. And everybody's on board. If you're a chemist, you understand that. If you're a biologist, the understanding what we think of when we think of evolution, which gets a lot of confusion still out in mainstream and that's just one example. The other examples, in other words, definitions are established by societies that are stat people, that are scientists, that are data science folks. They establish it. We don't have that for fantasy football.
No.
People are, flipping up a little peanut gallery, and here they are, and they're here for a couple of years, and then where are they? They're gone, or they join where are they? And so there is no definition. So until fantasy football or fantasy sports informatics, and you start granting PhDs in that, and there's a society is formed from those who have gotten training in, and by the way, any university, I'd be glad to help build such, at least from my thinking, having come along. I would love to see an informatics, a PhD in informatics that had a fantasy sports flavor to it. I know it can be done out there. It's just I'm curious how many years it's going to take before, Dennis, we have to go get a real PhD in fantasy football informatics. And then it's like, wow, this guy's trained 8-10 years in stats and AI and models and all this other stuff. It's like, wow, please teach us. We can sit at their feet on the mountain and, they will be our guru. But until that point, Dennis, there's going to be a definition is not solid. It's ethereal. It's just kind of like out there. It's like a wispy cloud. I don't know. I know you meteorologists have names for those far clouds that are real wispy and they're really, versus a big thunderhead, right? You have all these different names for clouds. You know why? Because there are weather scientists and they understand what a cloud is and the types they are, and there's definitions. So when a weather guy says cumulus clouds or whatever, then okay, we all understand that. Again, in fantasy, we don't have that. So adaptive probably could mean anything from somebody thinking, oh, well, there were 5 quarterbacks just taken. I have to be adaptive and take a tight end. That's being adaptive, you see, Dennis. Or, in other words, is it short-term adaptive? Is it, what does it mean, right? If is it knee-jerk? Like, well, 10 RBs off the board, I better take a WR. It's like, well, you see, it gets muddled because I think they need a overall strategy, a thought, a process to do this.
And that's kind of how I lay out, or why I lay out so much specifics with my better than zero strategy.
Yeah, your article does. You do. You give numbers. You call it. But I'm telling you, that doesn't, with Twitter, that doesn't come through. Even when you say it, Dennis, people don't, what does that mean? People don't know.
Because they could actually be thinking the exact opposite of what I
Yeah.
mean, because they could be saying, well, there's a tight end run. I better adapt my strategy and take a
Yeah,
tight end
take a
before they're all gone.
quarterback or something. Yeah. And they're confused. So I'm going to take the
In
20th best
Yep.
quarterback because they just had a run of tight ends. What does that have to do with anything?
And that's where my definition of adaptive, I say you have to react to what you see happening in the draft, and your dog agrees.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
by that I
he's
mean,
fussy out there.
by that I mean, my strategy, my better than zero strategy under the same name, if I do 10 drafts, Professor, against 10 different groups of players, I'm going to stumble across one draft where I've got like 4 or 5 disciples of zero RB, and they are not taking running backs. And if I can catch on to that, I can not only take a wide receiver before they do that they would take, but I can then know that they're going to continue to pound the wide receivers. So I'm going to get a couple of rounds to get my running backs to fall to me even farther. I can double and triple up on guys I need, but mainly it's trying to identify the different strategies of your opponents and to adapt your strategy to be able to still beat them. In my case, with better than zero, there's 2 common components to the strategy that can help you survive any draft, any combination. You're basically taking the best player available in the first 5 rounds. And I don't care if that ended up being 5 wide receivers or 5 running backs. I'm going to take the best rated player within that tier of ADP. So I'm not reaching 40 players deep in ADP to go get the guy who's got the value. I'll let the guy with value come to me. But it's the strategy of being able to counter the moves that are being made. It's no different than being a good chess player. You're thinking 2 or 3 moves ahead. If I move this piece, what is the reaction that I'm going to get from my opponent? It's the same thing in warfare. Like fantasy football is warfare without the bloodshed and dying. All you got a chance of is getting a lot of buffalo wing sauce all over. And that stuff stings. Don't touch your eyes after you've touched the buffalo wings. But the whole point is you've got to be able to move with get your moves in before the others. I love starting runs, Professor. I'm never going to end a run. If I've missed on tight ends, I've missed on tight ends. I'm going to go get my other strength somewhere else. And until I get past the 5th round, and even sometimes even later, Professor, I don't worry about the position I'm taking. I look at the position scarcity that's ahead. So if I'm on the turn, I've got I'm close to the turn. I got 4 picks before my next pick. And I see 7 wide receivers that are still on the board that I like. And I only see 1 running back that I think is the right guy to take. I'm taking the running back because he's not going to survive those next 4 picks. One of the wide receivers will, because they're 7-1. It's simple logic when it comes to choosing a player sometimes, but the position of that player is only determined by the scarcity of the best players available. And if that last running back's got an MVP rating of 60 and all the wide receivers are over 85, I'm taking the wide receiver, and the heck with running backs. I will figure something out and patch and fill if I have to. The more elite players you have on your team, the better your chance of winning. It's just that simple, folks.
And you have a late round kicker that flips in too, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, and in the later rounds in my better than zero, I'm usually taking running backs because I
Yes.
probably have my wide receivers taken. Part of a good strategy is always the ideal roster construction. And again, when I say ideal roster construction, it doesn't mean that you're this is, engraved in granite. It might vary from draft to draft, but once I have 4 or 5 wide receivers that I really like and that are above my criteria of an 80 MVP, if I've got 5 of them, I don't need a 6th. Not in normal redraft where you're starting 2 or 3 wide receivers and have one flex position. In a typical redraft league, I'm not talking having 7 flex positions, then I'm drafting forever on guys. But in a typical redraft, typical best ball, especially typical redraft, once I have 5, I'm happy. In best ball, it might vary between 6 and 9, depending on how the draft goes. But in redraft, I got 5, I'm fine. Quite often, I'll leave the draft with 4 and be just fine. As long as they don't all have the same bye week, I'm in business. And even if they had the same bye week, Professor, that's 1 week out of 17 that I'm kicking down the road. But draft value and have a roster construction
And adaptive.
an adaptive roster build. So when I say I'm going to have 1 to 3 quarterbacks, I'm going to have 6 to 10 running backs on a roster. I'm going to have 4 to 6 wide receivers. I'm going to have 1 or 2 tight ends. In redraft, that's my typical build. And yes, if you take the extreme on all of them, you have too many players on your roster. But you have to patch and fill. It depends. If you take a real elite quarterback, I'm either not backing him up or I'm backing him up later rounds. And that is the strategy that I like to use. I'm using more 2 quarterback builds nowadays, but that's because I'm tending to go a little bit later. I'm taking my value quarterbacks that I see, the guys that are falling much farther than they should. Joe Burrow is an example. Justin Herbert's an example this year. Kyler Murray is an example. If I can have 1 or 2 of those guys, I am set at quarterback and I'm going to do well. If I have Hurts, I don't need a quarterback until really late. I might take a Goff or I might take a Baker Mayfield even. Real later, much later in the draft while I've got all of my other positions filled out. But the earlier you take quarterback 1, the later, or maybe not at all, to take quarterback 2. And the opposite is true. The later you take your quarterback, the quicker I'm taking my second one. And that's in redraft. In best ball, that will vary considerably. But I like to have in best ball 3 quarterbacks when I leave a draft.
So, kind of focusing in on what am I doing? I'm on my second wave. And so I'll do 10 more drafts, best ball. And I'm going to be targeting a mid-level QB. My first 10 was the top 1, 2, or 3. Mainly Allen, Hurts, sometimes Mahomes, but a lot. I think in the 10, I got either Hurts or Allen. So I did have to go beyond them. But again, these are best ball, $5. So this is all beta test. My second will be a focus of probably picking up quarterbacks in the 7th round. There is a gap there, and using ADP knowledge. So when I set my campaign up, It's like I'm planning a D-Day invasion, Dennis. This is how I'm going to attack. And I probably in best ball, I don't pay as much attention to the what my opponents are doing. It's kind of like I want to force my will upon the board. That's so mine may be a little different on how I approach it, but these are beta tests, so that may be just me making sure I complete the test. But I never really get so crazy about runs or anything in best ball. Again, I'm haven't put all my data together. I just finished my defense against position. I'm going to start blending that in to my other data metrics. So I'm using June and then July to start fusing more and more into the gumbo pot so that in August, after the expo, where you and I finally get to meet, I'm going to be doing as many drafts as I can possibly do. These $35 FFPC, I'm going to be in every one I can be in, the slow ones, until they stop that. And I'll probably do the 6 hour, then the 2 hour, then I guess the live. But I've got a lot of my bankroll tied up. I've got a lot of got about 20 free shots from last year's successes. So I won't even have to tap my bankroll until about 20 or 30 in. So Dennis, my job is how many can I shoehorn in of the big money ones? To me, $35 league, that's big money to me. I understand there are people risk thousands of dollars. I'm not there yet. Okay, I'm building to that point. So that's kind of my overview philosophy in my beta testing. So I really haven't got to the point where I'm applying my August strategy. I'm still doing best ball beta test strategy. And with that, I like to know the landscape, right? The top down approach. Got a lot of that in our lesson plans. And I'm sharing this with Dennis. I have data from the 24th of May, and then I have data from yesterday, Dennis. And what you see on these two charts, and like I said, I'm recording this so you guys can listen, can watch the video. It'll be up on our podcast. There'll be a link here on YouTube, and you can see this data. And I have position quarterback, RB, tight end, wide receiver. There's no defense or a kicker. It's all called best ball slim. And first thing I noticed, Dennis, is tight ends. The big takeaway. Look in May, there were no tight ends taken in round 2. Look in June 12th, 4.
Wow.
That has
4.
completely shifted. And so I was waiting for your feedback. So notice the amount of tight ends has gone up, whereas in late May, 2.9 per player out of 12. So not everybody was taking 3. Now it's 3.3. So it looks like everybody's taking more tight ends, and they're taking them earlier just in the last 3 weeks. And notice the WRs have decreased a little bit from almost 8 to maybe 7.7. So people are leaving one extra WR and grabbing an extra tight end. Is kind of that shift. Quarterbacks, 2.9, so basically 3. And RBs, basically 6. So your league mates are going to grab 6, and they're going to grab 3 quarterbacks. So you should be aware of that strategy. I mean, if you're thinking you're getting into the 10th and 12th and people hadn't even taken a quarterback, whoever that is going to grab 3 between then at the end. So there's going to be some scrambling going on. So you can just kind of see who's going to be scrambling. And Dennis and I just noticed there was a lot of doublets in the people taking QB, and I wouldn't be surprised when I'm starting to do my second wave that I'm going to be looking for a tight end, kind of, that second, third tight end, trying to grab that. I'm curious to see how people sprinkle that. So that has completely changed, Dennis. And I remember thinking in May, I was like, wow, this takes a lot of pressure off. If I don't have to worry about Laporta or Kelsey to the third round, that opens up the first two for me to take two RBs, two WRs, or an RB, WR, or WRRB. In other words, the best player kind of concept that I found, and I don't have to worry about a quarterback. There was only, one, actually, the second round there was one, but the third round you could still get that early quarterback. So I got a lot of hurts because of that, and that shifted as well. No quarterbacks in the second round, so that's Allen has moved to the third round, but in May he was a little over aggressive in the second, so that happened. But anyway, I was free in the first two rounds to grab WR and RBs or combinations and not have to worry about QBs or early tight ends if I wanted there. So let me stop here. I've got more to talk about, but I'm going to let you react to some of this data. And you can look across, folks. I've got first round to the 20th, and you can see the actual numbers, and you can see what's going on and just kind of get a feel for the changes. If you and I'm going to do by blocks of 4. The next figure, Dennis, I compact the data into first 4, the next 4, and so forth, so we can start even seeing a little bit. But you'll see tight ends really jump out, and you can even tell it's going to jump out here.
And here's some interesting takeaways from this. The best ball average draft is telling us that there are twice as many elite wide receivers in the league as there are elite running backs. There's actually, when you look at elite in my definition, using my MVP metric, 120 is the super elite. Okay. There's 4 and 4. There's 4 wide receivers that hit that mark, and there's 5 running backs that are over 120 in MVP. 120 is actually there's 4 and 4. 120 means that player is a consistent player to the upside. He is producing at an amazing level for your fantasy football team. And in best ball, that means he's hitting the scorecard for you every week. And a few of those weeks, he's having real big scores. But the idea is it's the upside consistency that you're looking for. There's 4 of each that you would be looking at in that first round. But the ADP, the drafters, the mentality is I get burned by running backs. And this constant pounding of 0 RB is pushing the best running backs back in the draft. If you look at the 100 and above level, which is starting running backs, RB 1 through 12 usually, it's usually in that group. If you look at 100 and above in MVP, there's 14 wide receivers that hit that mark, and there's 12 running backs. You can get one of those 12 running backs pretty late in the draft compared to where you can get the top 12 at wide receiver. You've got to get them in the first 2 rounds. Whereas you can get the 12th best running back at the end of round 3. It's a full round difference. When I see that skew like that, it tells me that something is going on psychologically with the drafters, not by the data. I've been burned by too many running backs in the past. I'm taking a wide receiver. They are more likely to produce every week for me. What happened last year, Professor? Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, 2 of the round 1 early wide receivers, both went down with injuries. I thought it was going to even the playing field a little
It
bit.
didn't. It
With
hasn't.
running backs. It didn't. It
No.
has not done that.
No.
And the other interesting takeaway is quarterback. In redraft, I'm always telling you, if you get the 4th or 5th quarterback, I'm happy. You know, if once that the first couple of quarterbacks are off the board, I'm taking the 3rd, 4th, or 5th best, depending on where I'm falling in the draft. Best ball, it's similar strategy. Best ball, I get one of the top 5 quarterbacks. I then want to get 2 in the top 10. And then I'm greedy, Professor. I want 3 in the top 20.
Nice.
So in order to do that,
well, 35 are going to be
wait.
taken. So
yes,
yeah. So that means that you're going to be, your 3rd is going to be better than most everybody else in the league if you do that strategy. A lot.
So if I go 7, 8, and 9 with my quarterback picks, and I get the absolute worst one at each pick, I'm getting the 10th, 12th, and the 13th best quarterback.
Well, if you look at the pattern, 7, there's 4, 8, 2, 9, 1. And then it picks up 4, 3, 2. So it looks to me like the 9th round is kind of a secondary QB dead zone. Looks like the 6th round and the 9th round in this data are saying people are looking elsewhere. So if you wanted to be aggressive, yeah, you could take your 3rd by the 9th or certainly the early 10th. Yes, that could be a strategy, Dennis. In other words, I don't, maybe not this year, but it's something that you could test if you wanted to do QB as a beta test on, say, 4 or 5 leagues. Maybe you could see this data would allow you to kind of bolster up exactly where you need to make that move. And I would argue by the 10th round, you need to have 3 if you want to try to beat everybody else's, potentially even 2nd, but for sure 3rd. You can beat so a lot of your league mates.
So I can have in the first 6 rounds of a draft, I can take 3 running backs, 2 wide receivers, and a tight end.
Definitely.
Before I even scratch.
And that's what I'm going to be doing. Dennis, I'm doing the second wave, the 10. I'm going to start picking in the 7th round. And we talked about then the quarterbacks in the 7th round. And we were talking, and I'll share that. Let me share that if we want to, because we just had that discussion. But here is I don't know if it's showing yet. It's trying to load, but I may have goofed up my computer here. There it comes. So here are the quarterbacks: Burrow, Murray, Dak, and Love, 7th round guys. My com would say Dak, Murray, but they would give the edge to Dak by just the com. Your some of your metrics, I think it would, in some ways, Dak would be highly favored as well. Maybe, depends on which one you're using, Dennis. Your best, your weekly value percent, your MVP percent, and your best percent. uh, you know, Murray does well in your MVP percent, but Dak does well in your weekly value. He gets an 86% is as good as Burrow. So those guys are your top two by your metric. My com separates them and says Dak over Burrow. In other words, if I use Dennis as, okay, I'm going to use this weekly value metric, then I'm going to break the tie with my com. I break the Dak. If Dak's taken, I probably go in Burrow. If those guys are gone, I'm looking at Murray or Love.
And the reality, Professor, is I'm fine with any of those four.
Right. But I'm
If
saying if we're trying to, you know, to have to make a pick, right? Yeah.
Yep. And there's because of the variance in where they're going in the draft, depending on where you are drafting.
Right. Yeah.
You could land two of these guys because one might fall to the 8th
Love
round.
could slip to the 8th.
Love might fall out.
Yeah. And in fact, I might even be looking for that as my pitch, right? And when my best ball is, I'm trying to do 7th round QBs. Okay. So if I can do a 7th and one of my 7th slips to the 8th, that would be adaptive for me, not looking at my opponents, but just looking at what the overall has given me. And notice that there's a little gap, and then Purdy, Daniels, and Goff. To me, my com data would probably grab Purdy. You know, if I did a doublet in 7th, 8th, and not Love or anybody didn't drop, I would take, say, Dak and Purdy, that kind of thing. Or if Purdy wasn't there, Goff, to try to double up. If I was going to do a QB, which I might end up doing, because I'm just starting this this second wave of beta test.
What this tells me, Professor, is that we are going to be able to wait at quarterback and still be happy at quarterback. And what the later you take your quarterback in best ball and redraft, but here we're talking we're talking all best ball. But the later you take your quarterback, the more you're beefed up at running back and wide receiver, and the more likely you are to land one of those elite tight ends. And as we've seen, remember when we went back to our data studies of the tight end position, if you have the elite guy at tight end,
right,
you've got the top whisker well ahead of the box, which gives you an advantage each and every week. And this data is telling me, especially since I've got some running or wide receivers some quarterbacks that I value more than others. I might even be able to get 3 of the guys that are in the top 15 of my MVP data, which to me would be like stealing. If I can get 3 of the top 15 on my best ball team, I'm going to have a great score at quarterback each and every week, because their MVP data, their consistency on steroids, I like to call it, because it looks at the upside potential of players, is telling me that it's high enough that it would be a very rare day that all 3 of my quarterbacks will come up with a below median score on the same week. So this is a strategy that, and see the quarterbacks pushing back.
Isn't that interesting?
The tight ends are pushing. The tight ends are pushing forward.
Now remember, it's a tight end. Now look at the WRs in the first 2 rounds in late May. 15 taken, 12 taken now. So there's been a shift, moving the tight end up, moving some of the WRs back. So if you wanted to investigate, which I will, folks, that is, seeing that data tells me they some of these that were more highly thought of in late May have been shifted to the third round. And if I'm waiting on my quarterback and I say, oh, I'll take a gamble that I can take, maybe a little bit later tight end in the fourth round, maybe, then, I can maybe take an RB, a WR, RB, and then maybe a wide receiver kind of thing. In other words, I'm trying to plot how to be greedy and try to get, as Dennis said, in the top whatever level, an RB, two RBs, and one WR, or two WRs and one RB. Or, if I try to punt stack the tight ends, which I did in my first, then I'm trying to grab 2 and 2. And so I haven't quite shifted yet. I just did the first draft. I grabbed Tyreek Hill as in the third spot. Nothing surprising there. My com data, I probably should have taken Miles St. Brown, but I will have 9 more shots to take him. So he will definitely be somebody I'm looking for as well. But anyway, historically, again, going back to some of our earlier video lessons, WR in the first round, RB in the second is historically what the public likes to do. If they're not doing 0 RB, that's what the public's done. So just be aware of that. You can decide I'm going to be contrarian to that, or follow that, but try to follow with using the metrics. And I think with having our metrics, that gives us an advantage, because sometimes just being normal and letting others make mistakes and reach and get crazy, you win. You beat them in your league mates. Let them make the mistakes. So sometimes it's not being this crafty fox and finding the late round sleeper. It's letting everybody else take the duds, and you just take the value. Let them be the fools. Let them shoot the fake deer down here, Dennis. The wildlife fishing game put these fake deer out and try to get the hungry hillbillies to shoot at them at night. Sometimes it's a real deer and the hillbillies win. Sometimes the game wardens win. You never know what's going to happen. But living out in the country, Dennis, you'll be surprised on some nights walking my animals, my dogs. I'll hear a few shots. I'm like, whoop, there went a deer. Where's the game wardens? They could be hunting raccoons now, because, they may need supper for tomorrow night. Got to have raccoon down here. But remember, with the raccoon, Dennis, okay, if you come down south and you're going to be eating a raccoon dinner, make sure the fur is left on, to make sure it's not a cat. So that's just the hillbilly rule. Put the sweet potato, stuff the raccoon with the sweet potatoes and bake them. But you leave one paw on to make sure they hadn't slipped the old, the cat, between you and the Chinese restaurant fighting for the cats there. You've seen that meme, right? The Chinese restaurant. We have not seen your cat, but try our buffet. It's perfect. You haven't seen the perfect.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah,
anyway, that's some jokes. Anyway,
I lived right next door to a Chinese restaurant years
and
ago.
There were no rats
There
and
were
cats.
no stray. There were no stray cats and no rats that I noticed.
Okay, that's
But
just
anyway,
a joke, folks.
but
Don't cancel us. Anyway, so I
so
think, Dennis, before, let me finish this. So you can see the metrics I'm using making decisions. That is how I'm adaptive to the board in the big sense. Not, I know each league is different, but right now I'm looking across at all these patterns here, Dennis. And I think that's going to allow me to make some choices. And anyway, finish your thought, and then I wanted to hit this next figure here.
Here's the interesting thing that I'm going to point out about tight end premium. Okay. if you look at the data from tight end premium and compare to a non-tight end premium scoring, you usually see between 4 to 6 tight ends that emerge as really being valuable in that scoring, because so much of the scoring that comes from tight ends, as you get farther down the food chain at the position, once you get to about tight end 7 through tight end 22, for instance, a higher percentage of their points are actually coming from touchdowns.
Yep. Red zone activity. Yep.
Red zone scoring. Your elite tight ends are even more elite when it comes to a tight end premium. If it's graded typical tight end premium, where you get 1 point more for your tight end.
FFPC is 1.5 instead of 1. So you get a 0.5. Yeah, half point more
extra
per catch.
The only guys that are going to really be impacted
Kelsey,
by that
Andrews,
this year,
those guys are,
Kincaid,
Laporta, those kind of folk. Yeah,
Hawkinson, when he's healthy, those are the only guys that are going to be a big deal, and those are the guys that score over 80 on my MVP. So if you look at MVP
my com data,
80,
they're really I mean, it is really a complete cliff, Dennis. It goes down quick on any of these metrics.
And what I'm saying, professors, if you miss on those top 4 to 6 guys at tight end, don't overdraft the 7th through 22nd guys because it's tight end premium. Treat it like you would any normal draft.
I agree. And I'm just getting excited. Anytime I have data up here, I get excited. Sorry.
All right, Professor.
So what we're seeing here, folks, is I crunch down the rounds by fourths. So I like to look at kind of cut the pie into 5 slices here. And June 12th versus May 24th, Dennis. And look at the tight ends. Late May, there were 3 taken in the first 4 rounds, 7. So double.
Wow.
Yeah. So there. And so then I calculated the differences, and you can see a +4 down here at the bottom. So it highlights where there's been something really interesting. And there's another couple of spots with different positions that I wanted us to touch base on. So again, folks, notice I'm building this best ball cake with the patterns, with the global landscape. I have the metrics. Dennis and I have charted our metrics. I know he's done forecasting, which is taking it to the next step. Imagine a weather guy doing that, actually trying to have a forecast. How dare he? And, come on, Dennis, we got the data here. Anyway, don't use your head and use the data. Just kind of go. No. That's the art of the forecast. That's the art of fantasy, and I do appreciate that about you. But anyway, that if you look, wide ends, wide receivers dropped -3, tight ends +4 there, and the quarterback dropped. So you can see where the +4 tight ends went. Quarterbacks and wide receivers were dropped. So people waiting a little longer on the QB and waiting a little bit on some of those WRs, especially second rounders, right? If you remember, the first round WRs pretty much hadn't changed. It's the second round WRs. And so right away, this tells me I need to pay attention. Who are the 4 that are being taken? Okay. And I need to make a decision. Do I want one of those? And they're, we're talking Kelsey, Laporta, might be Kincaid, might be Andrews. I'm trying to think who else it might be. I think that's the 4. I could look. Anyway, so I've got to decide, because remember, I'm taking quarterbacks in the 7th round, hopefully, maybe even 7, 8. So I've got to decide my secondary adaptive. Do I take an early uh, tight end, or do I wait and try to stack, 3 or 4 tight ends in the best ball? And I haven't decided what I'm going to do yet, because I'm going to just kind of see how it goes. But anyway, that's what happened in the first 4 rounds, fifth through eighth. To me, I'm not seeing anything dramatic. A +2, a -1 doesn't really do anything. Ninth through 12th, RBs have picked up, Dennis, uh, from 12 in late May to 18, rounds 9 to 12. So people
Wow.
have moved up those RB 3, 4 types, Dennis. They're starting to probably overreach. Even my dog's overreaching for the bone there. He's excited. So I'm predicting that people either made decisions in the last 2, 3 weeks, or people jumping in and they're starting to get a little aggressive, or maybe that's the zero RB guys that are having to go RB,
Yeah.
RB, RB. And so what that's doing is skewing the value. And so what's happening is the 13th to 16 has dropped by 3. So it's like they're pushing it up. So maybe the zero RB folks have pushed up some of those. And to me, if you're pushing up things like that late, you're probably making a lot more mistakes than hitting. I know people want to think everything they pick is going to be gold. It's not the case, folks. And in fact, when I see this, my thought, when I see a +6 and a -3, half the league has probably made some mistakes they've taken the wrong RBs there as and again, it could be their seconds. I don't know if it's going to be their first and second. I guess that's an extreme zero RB. Usually about the 5th to 8th round, they pick one and then start loading up. But anyway, that hit me. And then in the 13th to 16, notice that the WR, some of those deeper WRs have slipped from the 9th, 12th. I think they've moved down to the 13 to 16. So I think there's probably some bargains there that didn't exist 3 weeks ago, Dennis. I think there's some bargains +5 there that really jumps out to me. 17 through 20, nothing really. I mean, some RBs have dropped -3. It looks like those zebra RB folks have started moving those late 4th, 5th round RBs up, fifth type. And I'm just wondering if you're at that point, should you be taking a WR or something? I don't know. Anyway, that's what the data jumping me. But the tight end early, dropping the second round WRs, and then the RBs in the 9th to the 12th have jumped up, and you're probably making some mistakes there. And I think some of the WRs have dropped 9 to 12 and have picked up, and they've moved to the 13th to 16th. So I think there's some bargains there, Dennis. And so I'm going to have to look in our data and see if I can't spot some of these guys that are bargains there as well. So I kind of just like to get a list of those as well. So that's how I'm setting my table to be how I do adaptive, is I adaptive to the landscape. And then, so I'll let you comment, then I'll show you just my pattern, my visual pattern of each of the 4 rounds.
So, two takeaways that I'm getting from looking at this data and looking at the changes, because we don't know the changes that happen in fantasy football are never a straight line change.
No.
So we cannot predict July's
Ooh.
based on what happened between May and June. But what we can do is understand, if we are drafting right now, these are the trends that are happening in the usual league. If I want a premium tight end and I'll define it. Premium means I want a top 4 guy. I'm going to have to pay for it. I'm going to have to start thinking second round to get my premium tight end.
7
And
will be gone by round 4, end of round 4.
correct. So I need by the second round or the absolute latest, the third, I need to get my premium tight end.
Yep.
Or I need to wait.
Yes.
And at quarterback, the good news is I think I can wait until the 7th round. And then I've got to get in a hurry to take my quarterbacks. And it's only because I see some value at quarterback this year. Love Justin Herbert, love Kyler Murray, love Joe Burrow at their price tags. And I don't like Lamar Jackson at his price tag. So I will let him go early and take 2. I'll probably be able to get 2 from the Murray, Burrow, Herbert group. I'll probably be able to get 2 of those 3 in most drafts. The other takeaway from this is looking at the running backs and the way that they're moving. I want my core 4 is how I describe it in best ball. I want my core 4 running backs by the 8th round. I want to be set.
There's 30
before
gone
it goes
the 8th round. Yep.
30 gone. If I've got 4 of those 30, I'm probably in great shape. Now, my next 4 running backs, I can then go for guys that I think will take over the starting role, or I can handcuff my starters. That's that you decide that on the fly. Traditionally, I do like to have 1 or 2 of my top running backs handcuffed in a best ball draft. I want to guarantee that I've got 2 backfields. They're doing great. This year, I might look for a James Conner and, the rookie Trey Benson. If I can grab both of those on the same team, I now have a backfield at a very affordable price. Those are the kinds of opportunities I look at. I don't really care if I get there, but that's my game plan going in. So those are the 2 takeaways. You got to pay up for a tight end if you want an elite tight end, or get yourself 3 in that next group from 7 to 24 and mix or match. Guys like Freiermuth might fall there. Those are the kinds of guys that I'd be looking at. But if I want an elite guy, maybe I'm getting the last of the elite guys who might be Mark Andrews this year. But that's how I attack a draft after I dissect the data like this. I understand what I need to do in order to get that elite 4. If I can accomplish it, great. I'm not going to overpay, but I might trend a little bit earlier. Maybe I was going 3rd and 4th round with my tight end, first tight end selection. Now I might be shopping in the 2nd to 3rd round.
And so I just tell folks as they're listening, we will revisit this probably the end of June. And I'm going to track that. This is what I need when I'm making a campaign for my 3rd wave, probably by starting the end of June. I'm going to check the data and I'm going to do this kind of metric. I've got now I'll have Dennis's forecast, all put in to the ADP model as well. So I'll be even better able. Of course, as the problem is, the sharper folks are going to start coming in later. So I know, and
Yes.
so as you're getting better, so are they, right, folks? So don't somehow think that I got this cheat sheet off of brand X that's going to beat these. Look, if you don't know who these people are in the league, I'm assuming if they're in an expensive league that they're either got AI bots or I don't know who I'm playing against. I'm assuming that they're as sharp as I am. That way I'm not, lulled into something or like, boy, I wonder if this value is going to slip. If you think it's a value, most likely there's going to be two or three others in the league, Dennis, come August that are also going to be just halfway paying attention. Oh, that's the value, guys. So it's like we got to find the post hype guys, the early value that everybody was talking about. They forgot, once camp and everything, all the blowhards start flapping their chops, then people will forget some of this stuff and you will remember and you might collect later. So that's some deeper July, early August kind of best ball things that I'm going to be looking at. So let me go just preview this.
And
Oh, go
and
ahead.
what and real quick while you're setting up the next graphic, it's all about managing your bankroll as
Oh,
well.
definitely.
We're talking about beta tests that we're doing, folks, that are all $5 leagues.
Yep.
Okay. And I'm doing about 30 of those this year in best ball. And then I will invest the bigger money
Yeah.
in fewer $35 leagues. But the whole idea is if you've got $1,000 that you're going to play in fantasy football, don't play two $500 leagues.
Ooh.
You need to play a lot of leagues to minimize your chance for an injury wiping you out. Because if you go to the casino with $1,000, okay, and it's a game of chance, you're probably smarter just taking that $1,000, putting it on red or black,
And
taking
walk
one
out the
spin
door.
of the roulette wheel,
Yep.
and walk out the door with 0 or 2,000. But in fantasy football, the smarter you are, the more leagues you want to play in because you want to spread out your risk because you're smarter than the average bear. You are better. You are going to have a better than a 50-50 chance of winning. And I know in roulette, you got a couple of ones that'll take your money either on red or black. But you've got, your best chance of having that win or lose scenario in a game of chance. Fantasy football is not a game of chance. It's not just a game of luck. It's a game of skill. And in a game of skill, you want to spread that risk. Just like in poker, I don't want to put all of my chips in on one hand. I want to be smart in how I play because I think I'm smarter than the other guys at the table. And in fantasy football, if you've got the edge on data, don't give it away by bad bankroll management.
I agree. I agree. Oh man. With the caveat, Dennis, if you're in the casino, hopefully you're not on the Titanic. Because it don't matter what, red or black, you still going down with the ship. So just realize the black swan, right? You never know. Even when you think you know, you still don't know. So always assume in fantasy that, that next pick, is there a chance you're going to get hurt? One of your next picks somewhere, if you do enough league, is going to get hurt. So just don't, whine and cry, be a wah baby about it, suck it up and, spread that risk and deal with it. Okay. So, my final figures, I'm just going to gently go through these. I plot the different positions here kind of on a look like a graph and I break by rounds. So this is rounds 1 to 4 here, Dennis, on June 12th. And you can just visualize some runs and whatnot. So we can see, we talked about tight ends, for instance, Dennis, but if you look at the data, it looks like the top 5 are almost collectively within 1 round, even though it starts kind of,
Yes.
0.15 to 0.27. The other 2 are spread. So even though there's 7 in the first 4 rounds. You've got to decide, when you're taking elite, do you want the 6th or 7th guy and the 7th guy in round 4? Or when you're talking elite, are we just talking about these top 5? If that's the case, you got one shot at one of them. 5 of your league mates, if you don't grab them, they're gone. It's not like in the 4th round, this is magically going to appear. So this adds some reality. I mean, I know we all want to forge and hoard. You want all the running backs and you want the elite tight end and quarterbacks as well, right? I mean, that's a salary cap game, right? That you have a shot at, doing some of that kind of stuff. But in, the snake draft thing, you got to decide where you go. So in the elite tight end, the public is seeing Kelsey and Laporta, but the other 3, and I don't know which ones they are, but I'm sure Andrews is in there, and probably Kincaid, and I don't know who's the other one, Dennis? Do we know?
It would be Trey McBride is
McBride.
the hot
Okay.
guy this year.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So you need to decide, can I live without those, or do I have to have those? So that's another where I'm talking adaptive strategy is that you got to know your plan. Okay. And so that's an issue. The other issue is wide receivers. There's going to be a boatload taken, but there's going to be a little gap. And look at round 2, there's only 4 taken. So everybody's grabbing 8. And then, there's some, if you want WR, seems to me the only time I would execute that is try to get one of these 2 of these top 8. And I don't know how. I guess if you were pick, 10, 11, 12, you might be able to cherry pick, these last 2 guys to try to do that strategy if you wanted. But most likely you'll get one of these 8. And if you did another WR, then you'll get these 4. And then there's another gap. And then there's 4, and then kind of 2. So in other words, you can kind of almost anticipate what you should do. Look at the quarterback. If you want Allen, you can wait till the 3rd round to get him. So you can get an elite WR, a fairly good RB, maybe the 4th, 5th best one, depends on your metrics, and a quarterback. So you're going to probably have to decide, unless you want to do a WR tight end quarterback and then hope that you're almost doing the 0 RB at that point. I mean, there's no use in jumping in the 4th round and grabbing another RB if you waited this long. And 12 RBs are gone by the 3rd round. I have this little red line there. That shows the block of 12. It ends right there. So your WRs, they end, the first 12 ends basically round 2. So you just need to look at this map and decide. And so now that I showed you this, you can go do your research. Elite tight end, do I want to take them? Elite quarterbacks, okay. Do I have to have them? Where are they at? You can start making some decisions and using this model here, Dennis. So that's the first 4 rounds. What
In
you
a
think?
a lot of this will depend on your draft position as well.
Sure,
Because
sure.
if I start out with the number 1 pick, I get CMC. That's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
But then I have to wait an awful long time till I get
right
my
down
next
here,
pick.
Dennis. Right there.
And right there, now I decide, do I want the 13th wide receiver by that point? Probably not. Do I want to go back to running back, or do I want to now take that elite tight end and I can have either Dalton Kincaid or Mark Andrews at that point?
And if you really wanted to get greedy, you could do CMC, Andrews, and then Allen, or maybe, maybe
correct
Hurts, or so you could get potentially a number one quarterback, a number one RB, and Andrews could be in the discussion for the top three tight ends. So you could have a pretty strong team if that's the way you go. So you need to anticipate, if you know your draft position, like I know Scott Fishbowl, if I was doing this for Scott Fishbowl, I would have to, get enough data. I would start planning using this landscape process to start playing. If I knew I had the sixth pick, Dennis, then I would plan accordingly. I could kind of map out, not necessarily the guy, but at least I could start researching the guys at that point.
And that's exactly what I am doing. But here's an extra twist to the Scott Fishbowl.
Yeah.
I'm doing a live draft this year.
Ooh.
At many of the live
Are
drafts.
You going to Chicago?
I'm going to Chicago.
Get
so
up
I'll
to
be
the
hanging
garden.
out with some.
Get the garden dog.
I'll be grabbing a dog and dragging it through the garden. Or depending on where we are, I might ask for my Italian beef to be baptized.
Ooh, I haven't heard that one.
That's another Chicago thing. So, Chicago, they take the Italian beef after they put it on the really nice roll, nice, soft, big roll. And they take it in this giant pair of tongs, and they dunk it in the juice.
Ooh.
But they don't call it dunking. At the real old-fashioned Chicago places, you used to ask for it to be baptized.
I like it.
And they baptized it like a Baptist, man. They all the way down. You didn't get just 5 little drops on the forehead. You got plunged into the pool with your Italian beef. But depending on how I want my Italian beef, I might want it with some mozzarella cheese and some peppers and some onions on it. In that case, I don't usually baptize it because it makes a real mess. So you got to know how you want to do your beef. But anyway, getting back to the craziness. In Scott Fishbowl, when you do a live draft, they sometimes have a contest to compete for draft positions. So you might go, I'm in the 6th slot right now. I might be higher or lower, depending on whether this live draft that I'm in, and not all of them do, but some of the live drafts have a live contest just to shake it up one more level. So while I'll be prepared for the 6th pick, I will also be prepared for 1 and 12, so I can adapt to anything in the middle.
That is wonderful. I look forward to the show where we discuss your strategy. I think we ought to just do a special Dennis's Odyssey into the Fishbowl in Chicago. Let's see. You need a T-shirt, Dennis. Drag me through the garden and baptize me in the Scott Fishbowl. Have a hot dog and Italian beef sandwich in the fishbowl with the fish. See?
Yeah, don't even get me started on the pizza either. So there you go.
Chicago pizza. Yeah, and I know it's different. I don't think live in Arkansas. We don't, like I said, we have the raccoon pizza. We don't have the real good Chicago pizza. We don't even know what that is, right?
So a real good Chicago pizza.
Yeah.
The sauce is on the top. The sauce is on the top.
Sauce is on the top. Okay. Never heard of that. I have never had a Chicago style then, Dennis.
I'll have to send you one.
I've never had anything like that. I don't even know quite how that works. So what is there like, what is there cheese? So it's crushed cheese, meat, sauce, or is it crushed meat, cheese?
That's correct.
What?
Nope. It's
Who's
crust,
on first, right? What's on second?
Some meat, some cheese, some meat, some sauce on the top.
Okay.
That's a deep dish Chicago style pizza. Now, we also have the cracker crust Chicago style pizza, which
Never
is a
had
thin
that.
crust, with a real crispy crust.
Never had that.
And that is of course cut up in, they don't cut it in triangles. They cut it across the pizza both ways. So you
Ooh,
get those small little end pieces that
nice.
everybody loves. Uh, they also have they were the home of the stuffed pizza,
Stuffed pizza.
which is basically just what it says. And how about this? Uncle Pete's in DuPage County does a double-decker pizza where it's a
Wow.
regular pizza.
Yeah.
They cook it, they build another pizza on top,
Oh my
and they
goodness.
cook it a second time. A large Uncle Pete's will feed a family of 12. It's a
Wow.
lot of pizza.
Wow.
But when people say Chicago style,
Yeah.
they typically are talking about the deep dish pizza that they don't think is pizza. But if you've had deep dish, it's different than a real pizza, but it's very, very good and very cheesy. The one constant of a Chicago style pizza, whether it's thin crust,
Mhm.
deep dish, double stacked, or a stuffed, there's a heck of a lot of cheese on a Chicago pizza, more so
Wow.
than any of the others. But yeah, it's you
So
gotta know
anyway,
your
get you a
you gotta love your
t-shirt.
pizza stuff.
Get your t-shirt with the all that. Why not? You know?
I think it'll work out. I think it'll work out great. Well,
Okay.
Professor,
Yep.
I encourage everybody to head on over to the sites of
Dennis is hungry
fantasyfootball.com.
now. That's why he's
Check
shutting his.
out. Oh, are you kidding?
Yeah.
The wife did a stew in the crock pot today, and I've been
Nice.
having to smell that all show. So we're gonna have big old biscuits, size of your hand, and
We call those cat head biscuits
wonderful
down
beef
here.
stew.
Cat
It's
head
gonna be
biscuits.
real good.
Cat
Cat
head.
head biscuits. There you go.
Yeah.
But anyway, head on over to the sites of fantasyfootball.com. Check out all the professors' wonderful dissertations on the ADP for best ball. Folks, if you dissect the data like we have, you will go into your draft a smarter drafter and ready and go through the ADP and find those players that you like more than others. Don't overdraft them, but maybe take them a half a round sooner than they're going, and you will have a winning roster. I'll have some more articles coming over there as well at the science of fantasyfootball.com. And come back here next week for another edition of the Science of Fantasy Football.
Get to work, folks.
Oh my goodness. That was hilarious.